Hi everyone. So today I thought it would be interesting if we reacted to a Jenna Marbles video called A Tour of My Plants. Let me disclose this by saying I've filmed this 3 times now. I've had some trouble with my audio and having a high quality audio while also filming myself on a webcam, while also filming the desktop, while also getting audio from the desktop and my microphone. It's been a learning process, but I think we finally have it understood. I have an apple martini, so grab some water or whatever suits your fancy and let's go.
Warning, this video is only for 32-year-old ladies and men and non-binary friends.
Did I hit
like
that note?
Boring domestic things. Sometimes it's not for me to understand why you guys want to see something. It's just my job to do it, I guess. It has been highly requested for me to do.
I really love Jenna Marbles. I think that she is such an authentic person. And as we go through this, you're going to notice that she admits here, not admits, but
I like watching these videos on YouTube.
She tells us that this is a work in progress, and you don't really hear that very often on social media, even in the plant community. You don't hear of many people owning mistakes and telling you what they're doing wrong. And I think it's very important for all of us to acknowledge what we're doing wrong and learn from our mistakes and not put on this facade that all of our plants are perfectly healthy and we know exactly what we're doing at all times. That's not the scenario. Never has been, never will be. It's part of being human, making mistakes. And another part that I love about this video is how authentic she is and how much she loves some of the most common plants. And it's really refreshing to see someone that is so passionate about plants that are so common. Very often in this very deep plant community, we have people that, you know, kind of glorify these very expensive plants like your variegated monsteras or your princess philodendrons, or these very expensive plants that can reach upwards of a few $1,000s, which is insane for a plant. So it's very refreshing to see someone like Jenna that has such a big influence on people really be so grounded and focus on plants that are so common, because the goal is not to pursue this vanity, but to rather, you know, please herself and be authentic and bring greenery into her own space.
It's a variegata. He's variegated. He's got these white little lines on him. He's absolutely stunning. I bought him as this little plug, so, you know, in about 30 years, he'll be a full plant.
She also brings up later that she does purchase smaller plants to save money. She has a Ficus lyrata that she talks about later. And that is very true. You definitely can save some money by purchasing smaller plants. And she's also talking here about different propagation stations. You certainly don't need test tubes. You can just use an old glass in your cabinet or a coffee mug. Or just soil as well, but water propagation is a really cool aesthetic way to propagate vining plants in particular.
You know, right away to adjust. So not all these plants are gonna stay here, but I like the light that they get here. So that's why you've seen a lot of different plants here and it seems really overwhelming, but I promise you it's not. This plant I got not too long ago, but that's why he's still here, because I still want him to adjust. And I also potted him in a beautiful ceramic pot. And I'll show you a couple of the Hoyas that I
For the sake of brevity, and because I've watched this already and I know what she's going to say, so I don't know if I'd call this a reaction video, I will skip through some of this. Here she's talking about how Hoya roots can actually cling to terracotta pots, and how she prefers this glazed ceramic to hopefully combat any kind of adhesion that the roots of a Hoya or really any plant will happen to a terracotta pot. And I haven't personally experienced this with Hoyas, but I have experienced this with a string of bananas. I had a 4-inch pot and its roots stuck to the terracotta, and I actually had to damage the root system quite a bit in order to free that plant from the terracotta. This is a beautiful whale fin snake plant that she has. They're hard to find in my area, to be honest with you. There is one garden center in my area that has about 3 or 4 of them, but they're not for sale because they're just propagating them. But they're just on a shelf, like just out of reach. And it's so tempting, let me tell you. So tempting.
In my little nursery area, we have a nice sheer curtain. This is a south-facing window, so he gets lots of good light while he adjusts, and I find a good spot for him. This is a beautiful...
And she also mentions that this dining room or this table that she has these plants on is a really good space because it gets great light and she acclimates plants here. And that's something that as a new plant parent or even as a more advanced plant parent, you will very much so benefit from, is having a space dedicated in your home somewhere that is dedicated to acclimating plants. You know that it has ideal conditions such as a bright indirect light scenario or bright direct light, depending on the type of plant that you have and humidity requirements that a certain plant requires. Basically any area in your home that really mimics a greenhouse setting to help mitigate any kind of shock that a plant may experience after bringing it home from the nursery. I think this is a Chinese perfume plant, but she talks about how she got this plant from Logi's, which is an online greenhouse retailer, and how dangerous it is to go online and find all of these interesting, fascinating houseplants on there. But Logi's is a really awesome resource if you're looking to purchase plants, whether they be indoor houseplants or landscaping plants online.
A plant unless it absolutely needs to. They don't need this, but I like doing this an awful lot. Let's move over here to...
So now she's going to talk about a Ficus Elastica, the ruby cultivar, which is this really pretty ficus that has this red toned foliage. I'm not too crazy about the one that I have, but I wanted to touch on something else here. She actually missed some of her plants. We just saw her do that a few seconds ago. And honestly, the jury is out on whether or not misting your houseplants is beneficial to them. On one hand, you have a slight humidity increase based on how much you spray them and how frequently you spray them. And on the other hand, you actually have an exposure to fungus, bacteria, and other gnarly things like that due to wet foliage over a period of time. Oftentimes people don't recommend that you water at night because there's not as much sunlight exposure to wick out any kind of excess moisture, which could lead to more mold or fungus problems or rot even. And misting, it's debatable whether or not it's a good thing. If I were you and you were misting your plants, I would really recommend that you get a pebble tray. You get a drip tray, fill it up with pebbles, dump some water in there, and then let the increased surface area due to the pebbles that are coming out of the drip tray increase the amount of evaporation from said drip tray, thus increasing the humidity and the general vicinity of that plant. You can also cluster your plants together to increase humidity and reduce the amount of humidity that is being perspired. And you can also purchase a humidifier. That's really the best way to increase humidity. And this plant is named Miss Keisha.
Which can live in Southern California, so my plan B is in many, many years, if this gets far too large, we can always put her in a pot and she can live up.
And yes, bird of paradises get absolutely humongous. I lived in SoCal for about a year, a few years ago, and driving around there and seeing how humongous birds of paradise got in their native environment is insane. They get as large as some buildings. I mean, I'm talking like, they can get like 4 to 5 to 6 stories tall. These plants get humongous in their native environment, and they make a really great houseplant. Granted, you have the proper amount of light.
Is Gilly. Gilly is a Monstera deliciosa, and when I got this plant, I got this at Lowe's, and somebody had did this plant so fucking dirty. So it was potted in a ceramic glazed pot, and the drainage hole was like teeny tiny, really bad. And so I brought it home, and I was like trying to let it dry out for like 2 weeks, and it was wet, which means it's gonna drown, it's gonna get root rot. So we had to do a little rescue mission and get him out of there. So that's why some of his leaves aren't doing so well, but since we repotted him in here, he's doing much better.
So I want to talk about something she mentioned here, and it's the fact that whenever you purchase a plant from a big box store, oftentimes the people that are taking care of these plants aren't necessarily trained in how to care for all of the different varieties of plants that are there. And they just kind of use one schedule for all of the different plants, which obviously doesn't work. And it's not ideal for these different plants. And this isn't shade by any means. I'm just saying that as a consumer, if you're going into one of these big box stores and you are attempting to purchase one of these plants, do your due diligence and look over this plant for any kind of pests, signs of stress, signs of over or under watering. That way you can really maximize your bang for your buck and also make sure that you're not introducing pests into your environment and you are not really starting with a stressed out plant, thus hindering your ability to help the plant thrive.
I think you're talking to. So I think.
And here she's talking about a fiddle leaf fig that she has that is stressed out and has these red marks on the top of the leaves due to incongruent watering. And oftentimes you'll notice this with very finicky plants and with things like landscaping plants and like flowers and stuff like that. You really want to make sure you have almost a schedule with watering. If you are anybody that has tried to grow any kind of annual flowers, anything like that outside, probably knows that you have to water those guys very consistently and on a schedule. I'm not saying you have to water the fiddle leaf fig consistently. However, it does prefer a deep soaking rather than a shallow watering, just in like one area of the pot, for example.
To the Hoya section. I'd say they're probably my favorite houseplant. So I think
everybody has their like favorite genus of houseplant. I have never really been too big of a Hoya person. She has a pretty good collection here, and she goes over the different ones she has. She has Crinkle 8, she has Crimson Queen and Crimson Princess. She also has the regular Hoya Carnosa and a few different other ones as well. But like I said, I'm not a huge Hoya person. I like them as houseplants more often than not. However, they're not super readily available in my area, and I would rather have something that is a little bit more lush and viney, something like a pothos or a philodendron, your typical philodendron versus a Hoya. But the Hoya Carnosa here is really, really beautiful. She also has a lot of Sansevierias or snake plants, Dracænas now, that we will see later in the video, and I very much appreciate that.
Shape of a heart, and I don't know if you have eyes or anything, but like this is not a Hoya carry eye. I went on Instagram and I figured.
So for the sake of brevity, I'm going to skip through some of this. Here she really just talks about some of her different Hoyas and how much she likes them and all of the different varieties she has. And then we go over to this shelf behind her, and she has a few different kind of pothos. She has the neon pothos there on the left, and then she also has the Silvery Ann pothos, which is actually also known as the Scindapsus pictus. It's actually not a pothos in terms of the taxonomy of the plant. And then she has there's a few different names for the one on the right there. Enjoy is one of them, and there's another name for that as well, a common name, but Enjoy is what you can typically see that marketed as. She also has an Alocasia frydek, and this is a Philodendron micans, which is this really beautiful red-backed leaves that have these dark green velvety leaves on the front, and they trail very similarly to a pothos or other typical vining philodendrons, such as your heartleaf philodendron and things like that. And that alocasia fried egg is beautiful. Alocasias are a little finicky, but they are really beautiful plants.
I'm saying, look at him. He is the only alocasia that I have. I know typically they like higher humidity, but he's okay without it, I guess, so I've read. But he's not doing particularly well, I would say. I think this is normal. This is a dead leaf. I know they can go into their tubers or sort of go dormant, so he hasn't gone dormant, but he's also not putting out a leaf right now, but I think he's okay. I think he's chilling. He was upstairs for a little bit and he was getting too much sun up there, so I moved him down here. But every day I wake up and I just talk Julian's ear off about what.
And this is also like a great point, is that you have to play around and figure out where your plants are happiest in your home. Everybody's plants are, or sorry, everybody's home is a little bit different in terms of humidity and light exposure and things like that, where you're at in the world, what season you're in, what time of day it is. You know, there's so many different factors, and nobody can really sit here and say, oh, you need to have this plant in this location in your home at this percentage humidity. It's really a trial and error, and that's kind of the beauty of houseplants and just being human. And I wanted to touch on something here as well with her different succulents. I don't keep succulents for many reasons. One of the reasons is due to the high amount of light that succulents need. And we can actually see here, this is a good example of succulents not getting the amount of light that they necessarily require. So we have these succulents down here that are very compact and bushy. And then if we look at the other pots, this is a somewhat good example, but specifically the top pot here, you can see that these succulents are kind of branching out almost in like a tree pattern. They have more of an upright growth rather than a small, compact kind of bushy growth. And that is known as etoliation. And that is whenever the plant is not getting as much light as it requires, and it actually stretches in an attempt to find more light. So succulents, I'm not a fan of. I've killed so many succulents, like the echeverias and the things like that, and I'm just not a fan for the large amount of light that they need.
Pot. His name is Rex. This is Vin Diesel. He is a ZZ plant. He is also in his nursery pot. This, I would say, if you are like brand new, like I was, and you don't know what to get or what would be happy in your house, get a ZZ plant. They need nothing from you, and they just give you so much love. Like, he's just sitting on this ring.
Yeah, ZZ plants, she's absolutely right. ZZ plants are really excellent plants if you are a beginner, or, you know, even if you're not. I actually have one behind me there. I don't even know if you can see it. This is a new setup. But they actually are in the potato family, which is really interesting. They have something known as tubers, I believe, and they grow rhizomally. So basically what that means is that they grow underneath the surface of the soil, and their tubers are actually kind of like these root balls, or I mean, they kind of look like potatoes. And they grow from that, and then they spread out and multiply like that. They're kind of like bulbs, which makes them very resilient because they have so much water storage and nutrient storage as well. As long as you don't overwater your ZZ plant and it is getting some amount of light, it should be happy with you. This is a coral cactus, which she mentions, and the interesting thing with the coral cactus is that it is actually two different house plants. So we have this kind of stalk of the cactus down here, and then we have the kind of brain-looking, interesting coral part of the cactus. So these are actually two different house plants that are grafted together, which is very interesting. I don't know of any other house plant on the market that is marketed as one plant, but it is actually two grafted together. I may be wrong in terms of not knowing any other ones, but they're very popular, and you can find them at all of your big box stores for whatever reason. This is a ponytail palm, as she mentioned.
This is an Apuntia, or a prickly pear. Amazing. Can't even believe it. What are you? You're the best plant ever. He's just spectacular. I love him. Don't touch him though, or else he'll prick you. He pricked me earlier. This right here is a string of pearls. I originally tried to keep this plant indoors, but then I found out that he liked it outside better. And he's just been putting out these little flowers and just like having a great time. So I left him out here because he's just...
Yeah, her string of pearls is beautiful. And if you can look, you can see all of those blooms that she has on her string of pearls. If you've never had your string of pearls bloom before, I suggest that you put it outside during the warmer months if you are in a cooler climate right now. But these blooms are actually, while they're insignificant, they actually smell really wonderful. They smell of cinnamon, which is really interesting. And this is a burro's tail.
Or a donkey tail succulent. What did you name this one?
Burro.
You named it Burro.
His name is Burro.
But yeah, these plants live out here. They're both in their nursery pots.
They're absolutely gorgeous plants, and they can get so long, and they make a really good filler in a basket or any kind of planter that you need more of kind of like a cascading look to it. Burro's tail is a really great option if you have tons of bright and direct to a little bit of direct light.
But I'm looking forward to that. Aren't you, Julian?
Yeah.
Outside plants. Let's move into the dining room, which is where my too much gene is really showing off, right? This is...
I don't know if anybody that has houseplants can be modest about the houseplants that they buy. It's a slippery slope. It's a very slippery slope. But here, as she mentioned, we are in her dining room, and she has a lot of different things going on in here. She mentions that she doesn't get a whole lot of light in here, so she's kind of working with limited resources. And I think she's doing all of the right things in terms of the plants that she chose to put into this space. She's talking about how she doesn't get any light over here, and she actually had a golden pothos in there that withered away and died. However, if we look, she has a lot of different Sansevierias and a lot of medium to low light tolerant plants that actually do very well. Sansevieria, I'm going to use Sansevieria. I know it's a Dracaena, but it's a snake plant, but it's just force of habit. Those are really, really great options for lower light scenarios. ZZ plant is another great option. And she also has, I believe that's...
I believe the first one
and
gave me, so the second
Aglaomenia.
one. This one, and this one are all variations of a Chinese evergreen.
Chinese evergreen,
This is a marble queen.
Those are good options as well. Oftentimes you'll see Chinese evergreens in shopping malls. I don't know if anybody goes to shopping malls anymore, but if you do, you probably see Chinese evergreens. Marble Queen pothos, or really any kind of pothos, is another good option for low to medium light scenarios. And we'll see that she actually has some peace lilies as well. Oh my gosh, let's talk about this Sansevieria really quick.
Main container, because I wasn't quite sure.
So this Sansevieria that she's about to show us is a Bantel Sensation.
Like the low light special room. All these plants are like, I'm cool with
I
low
love
light.
her pot
Snake
decor
plant,
at the bottom
snake plant.
there.
This is a variegated.
Yes,
snake
that
plant.
variegated
This
snake plant is known as the Bantel Sensation, and I
a
love them. I think they're so pretty. Really great snake plant. And she has some more, she actually has a peperomia over there that she says is doing very well.
Peperomia Ginny, which I wasn't too keen on. Like, I know there are people that love certain types of houseplants. Like, I love Hoyas, as you can tell. There are people that are obsessed with peperomias, and I'm just not super obsessed with them, but I saw this was labeled as a super low light plant, and I was like, no way, that's not right. He's been pushing out so much new growth. He's been sitting right here,
I'm not familiar with that type of peperomia. It really reminds me of the obtusifolia, which is also known as the baby rubber tree. And it does surprise me that it's doing so well in low to medium light. That is a domino spathiphyllum, or domino peace lily. It is a variegated type of peace lily.
He's just chilling. And this
granted,
is a pothos on...
Granted that you give that peace lily enough light, it actually does have quite a bit of lighter foliage variegation, and some of the blooms can actually turn green rather than white, and I believe that's also the case on regular spathiphyllums if you're giving it a little too much light.
Experiment. I got him from a nursery because he was a special order for some.
She talks about this palm and how palms are tricky, and she recognizes that, and how typically palms are brighter light plants. However, this one was marketed as a medium light to bright light plant. I would be very interested in seeing an updated houseplant tour if she was still on YouTube. This was uploaded a year ago now, and I don't know if this plant would still be alive. I would suspect that she would probably have to move this plant to somewhere where she gets more light. If I don't know if that window that she is standing in front of is east or west facing. That could make a difference, but I would expect that that would need a little bit more light and humidity.
Mistreating him. I worry about him constantly. Over here, put 3 peace lilies.
It'll be interesting if Jenna ever has kids, because she obviously is going to be a helicopter mom. And there's nothing wrong with that, but
It's the peace lily that was in that corner.
And I saw this earlier whenever I filmed this video the past 2 times, and I do not know what kind of peace lily that is. She doesn't mention it, but I've never seen a peace lily like that. So if you guys know, let me know. I think that's a really gorgeous cultivar.
Red Riding Hood Aloe, I think is what it's called. He got scorched.
And she goes over how these different aloes that she has are scorched. And it was very interesting to me because whenever I first started growing aloe, I really didn't view them as a plant that would need indirect light. But upon understanding the plant's needs and putting it in bright direct light, I definitely noticed that the plant was getting scorched. So this is part of that learning process that we were talking about before. Aloe, unlike many succulents, from my experience, actually prefers more bright indirect light rather than tons of bright direct
I decided.
light. So aloe is a good succulent choice if you're looking for that succulent vibe, but don't have tons of bright direct light.
Humidity, thank you. Okay. We did get
Also, she's talking about how she's coercing Julian, her boyfriend, into letting her have all of these humidifiers in the bedroom to create like a little plant sanctuary. And I want each of you to put your hand up if you're in a relationship and your partner has been very cooperative with enabling and supporting your plant addiction.
better because it's so dry
And
here.
guilty as
And then
charged.
if you get better humidity when you sleep, you'll sleep better. Please.
And this is what we call rationalizing.
With the door shut, if you guys aren't scratching at it, trying to come in and out at about 50% humidity, which isn't even super high or anything. I know people blast their humidity, but that's like the bare minimum for a lot of the plants that like it. And there's only like really a couple in here that actually need it. Some of the Hoyas.
Yeah, 50% humidity is pretty low in terms of very tropical plants. That does do okay. Certain plants definitely would prefer closer to 60 to 70% humidity. However, that can be unreasonable if you're trying to just do one room and people are going in and out of the room. And humidifier maintenance can be kind of a pain in the butt. I know if you have like a wick-based humidifier, it can be a pain to clean them and maintain them and change the water all the time. So I understand. Humidity can be tough.
When I saw this plant, this is one of those plants, I was like, I will do anything you want. What do you want? I will do anything for you. Look at the backs of your leaves are red and the fronts of your leaves are green, and you just come out with these spots like, oh my God. And
Begonias definitely need high humidity. And she does mention that she is getting some brown crispy edges from the humidity dropping below 50% occasionally, which is to be expected. Begonias, I don't believe, have any place outside of a greenhouse environment unless you can provide them with tons of humidity. I have had begonias in the past. Almost all of them have died. All of them have died. Who am I kidding? All of them have died because I cannot provide them with what they are looking for, and that is very high humidity. Eventually, I'm going to look into getting like a terrarium space or like a kind of greenhouse cabinet that is made of glass that can be enclosed for high humidity, in which case I will be looking into begonias. And I don't even want to talk about this plant. I can't with Chinese money plants. They're cool and they reproduce a lot and they're like relatively low maintenance, but I don't know. Something about the Chinese money plant, and I've mentioned this in plenty of my other videos, just does not do it for me. And you know what, Jenna, I have to say I'm very proud of you for not having any different Bacchias that you've mentioned, because they're trash plants and they don't belong in anybody's home and they're impossible to take care of.
he grows in this beautiful vine with these leaves, also known as like the Swiss cheese vine. This is one of the other plants that...
And that is an Adansonii Bonstera, which is totally beautiful. I love that plant. I think it does not belong in a house whatsoever. but it's absolutely gorgeous. And here she is talking about her Burgundy Ficus Elastica. And this is what I mean whenever I said earlier or previously that she gets hype about some of the most common houseplants, and it's very refreshing to hear someone that is so passionate and excited about such a, quite frankly, relatively common houseplant and easily accessible, rather than contributing to this hype of rare plants and things like that. The pursuit of the next biggest thing.
Carnosa, or a cinnamon scented Hoya. So someday, if this plant ever bloomed or flowered, those blooms tend to smell like cinnamon. Although I've heard lots of Hoyas, they all have different colored blooms, different looking blooms, and some of them smell like ramen noodles or chocolate or anything in between. This is the unvariegated version of the Hoya Compacta. It's just a regular one, just green. But as you can see, he grows pretty slow, so it would take many, many, many years for me to get one of those plants that have the big, long, like octopus tendrils, which I think are so cool. This right here is my one and only Oxalis. Oxalis are like a false shamrock plant. They're super.
Oxalis is really interesting. I've never tried Oxalis, but I did want to talk about her Hoya Carnosa Compacta. And she says that it's a relatively slow growing plant and it will take a lot of time. However, and I don't know if this is anybody else's experience, I'm certainly not trying to discredit her, but I'm simply speaking from my specific point of view, and that is that my Hoya Carnosa Compacta actually has grown very fast. Within the past year and a half, it's grown about 1.5 feet. So I'd say a good foot a year. Just my experience.
I'm like, all right, let's put a snake plant there because the snake plant will appreciate it. This is a Starfish, another couple of Hani, Sansevieria, Japonesa 6 braid. Let's go to the bathroom. So this over here, this is my only Dracaena. He is a Dracaena warneckii.
Oh my God, I love that. Oh my gosh. I've never heard of this type of, or this cultivar of Dracaena, but I think it is gorgeous.
He's just really cute. He needs almost nothing from me. This is a curly spider plant, which I didn't know.
Okay, don't lie. I know that you probably have heard of snake plants before you heard of curly snake plants. And whenever you heard of curly snake plants, you probably lost your crap because it was exactly what you needed. It was so unique and interesting and cute. And that is very much my experience. And then she just goes through her bathroom and tells us about a pothos, another Hoya, and a lipstick plant that she has in, or no, not a Hoya, sorry. I thought it was a Hoya in here. It's a Scindapsus, but a lipstick plant that she has in here. I have never tried a lipstick plant. It is on my list of things to try. For some reason, I'm just not very crazy about the lipstick plant, how they look. I don't know, it just doesn't really do it for me. It reminds me of like the Kmart version of a Hoya Carnosa Compact. But, I mean, that's Jenna Marbles' A Tour of My Plants video. She is such an icon. She is a 32-year-old lady. She's such a cool woman. And whenever she released this video about a year ago is whenever I started to get into houseplants. And I would love to see an update of this if she ever comes back to YouTube or anything like that. But I really hope she's doing well. And I hope that you enjoyed this video. And if you haven't seen her Tour of My Plants video, I know I talked over it a lot, but it was my reaction video, not her video. So go ahead and watch that if you didn't already. And share if, you know, what you feel about the plant hype nowadays, and what you feel about a lipstick plant and Dieffenbachia and Chinese money plant, because I would love to know. And also, what do you do about your humidity and other common problems like that? Anyways, I will see you all in the next video. Bye, everyone.